Hello, everybody. It's so wonderful to see many faces I don't recognize and many faces that I do recognize and I haven't seen in a long time, and that is wonderful. We have a lot to do in 1 hour. The topic of the day is spiritual identity. I know that I wasn't totally uninvolved in picking the topic, but spiritual identity. I want to know if I woke you up in the middle of the night and said, what is spirituality? What is spirituality? I'd like to get some answers, I think in the chat box, because of the number of people that are here. If you could just right now in your chat box, tell me what you think, what spirituality means if I would wake you up in the middle of the night. What is spirituality? Give you 20 seconds to think. Personal relationship with Hashem, connecting to God, relationship to the One, connecting to something that's a higher power, connecting to some feeling of connection to God, a lot of connection, a feeling that there is something beyond. We are not alone. We are connecting to something deeply within ourselves and very much outside ourselves. Perfect. This is exactly, I think, the notion of dveikut in Jewish tradition that we call dveikut, cleaving to something that is bigger, something that's beyond yourself. These are such good answers. Sometimes we feel it with nature, a oneness with nature. Sometimes we feel this oneness with a sports team. You know, at a great sports event, you can feel this connection to all of the Redskin fans out there. There's the or panecha, a sense of God's light shining on your shoulders. And in that sense, because spiritual identity is this, spirituality is about losing ourselves to something bigger than us in many ways. I think that it's easy actually to think about spiritual and identity as almost as an oxymoron, because the spirituality is about losing yourself and identity is about focusing on yourself. Me. It can be when we took identity as a theme for this year, many people complained because it's so self-indulgent. It's all about me. And so I want to sort of explore what is the connection. That is really, the Pahad Yitzhak takes that question up. What is spiritual identity an oxymoron? Can we find ways to make those two things go together? And I want, and I picked just to take a ma'amar, which is a passage, a passage in the Pahad Yitzhak, and share it with you today. He writes, let me say a little bit about the Pahad Yitzhak. He is Rav Yitzhak Hutner, who lived from 1906 to 1980, so he's a contemporary. He was born in Warsaw, moved to Israel for some time, and then to America. Was the head of the Rav Chaim Berlin Yeshiva in Brooklyn, where Freda is right now, where Robert was grew up. And I like to call Pahad Yitzhak Chassidus for Gemara brains. He was like a classic Rosh Yeshiva, and loved lumdus, like to get out his thumbs and learn Gemara. I'm a little bit in and out. Okay, let me see if I can go to someplace a little bit more. Can everyone, if you feel like, can you go like this if you feel like you don't hear me so good? Some people hear me, some people don't hear me. Okay, so I'm going to try to go out here and see if it will be better. The sound's not so good, so I'm moving. Hold on, I left my notes. Okay, so the Pahad Yitzhak, Chassidus for Gemara brains. And he has a very powerful idea about, he was, interestingly, kidnapped by, he was hijacked. He was on a hijacked plane and survived it. He was also survived the Hebron massacre. Let's not get too bogged down in who he was. He writes books on each of the holidays, and he wrote a book about Shavuot. And each of these passages are called Ma'amarim. They're articles. It's about 5 pages. I put it on the source sheet, the whole thing for you. But in this case, we don't have time to do all of that. There's no way we can do the whole thing. So I picked some selections that we'll be going through together during this time. And he moves, his starting question is this. His starting question is, Barchenu Avinu Kulanu Ke'echad. This isn't on your source sheet. Barchenu Avinu Kulanu Ke'echad Be'or Panecha. Now the people who can't hear me well are the lucky ones, right? As I'm singing. Bless us, all of us as one with the light of your eye, with the light of your face. And it's a request of God to shine God's light on us. And of course, we'll feel blessed that way. But he says, ke'echad. We say in the liturgy, ke'echad, that we have to do, we should be blessed as one. And the Pahad Yitzhak asks the question, why emphasize oneness specifically in this context? And it doesn't make sense to him. That's his framing question, and I hope we'll get from his framing question to something about Shavuot, something about spiritual, something about identity. And along the way, he uses as his base text my absolute favorite Mishnah in the entire Mishnah, more than 5,000 Mishnayot, and he picked my very favorite one. This is what he said. I want to, I'm going to send you to a chavruta, to just a few minutes, 7 minutes of chavruta on this Mishnah, but I want to give you some basis for it. The Mishnah is beautiful, and that will be obvious to you immediately, that you'll feel the power of the Mishnah. But what I want you to also feel is the craziness of the context of the Mishnah, because the Mishnah, it's in the Mishnah Sanhedrin. Sanhedrin is chapters 4 through 10, 11 of Sanhedrin are all about capital punishment. How do we execute somebody? And the 4th chapter with this Mishnah is found is all about the capital trial. And the witnesses, how do we interrogate and cross-examine the witnesses? And just as they're about to give their testimony, we give them a little Musar spiel, a little bit of moral encouragement. And this, and we understand that of course you have to understand that it's a mitzvah to give testimony, to have someone executed. And when you give that testimony and then that person is convicted, you will be the one that is throwing the first stone at that individual. And it's exactly in that context that the rabbis give this little speech, and that's the speech that we're going to have. It is a speech about the power of the individual. You will see the keyword echad. I want you to enjoy that keyword echad in the Mishnah, and to see, for some of you, everyone will be able to look at this Mishnah in your chavruta, wherever you are, to look at it in Hebrew, or to look at it in English, to look at it for the first time, or to look at it for the 12th time. If you're looking at it for the 12th time, I suggest that you pay attention specifically to, I won't turn to the side. I'm going to work on my headphones in a second to see if I can get them going a little bit better. Where was I? I'm sorry. There's a beautiful chias. There's a literary structure, and if you can pay attention to the literary structure and to the theme of each section of the Mishnah, then that will help you as you come back to the class. Okay, so Simon is going to right now send you into these magic breakout rooms that we have here in the land of Zoom. You will be set into very small groups. Read out loud to each other. I your speakers work better than mine, and I'm going to see if I can use this time to get fixed. You've got 7 minutes. I will see you very shortly. On your mark, get set, learn the Mishnah. The Mishnah, starting with the Mishnah. Just a few minutes on this beautiful, beautiful Mishnah. Chiastic structure. I hope you saw it. For this reason, the person was created individually in the world. Ends with, for this reason, every single person is obligated to say, Bishvili nivra ha'olam, the world was created for me. Those two statements, of course, reflect each other. And then inside those two statements, you've got two statements that are introduced with, right, those two lefichachs are introduced with two lilamdecha and lahagi, to teach you that whoever destroys a single soul, Scripture considers that person as though they had destroyed a complete world. And whoever preserves a single soul, Scripture ascribes merit to that person as though they had preserved a complete world. And that is a reflection of, and to proclaim the greatness of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. For if a person, a regular, just a Joe Schmo, mints many coins from a single mold, they all come out the same. Not so. God, Melech Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. God made everybody with a single mold, and every single person came out differently. Those two statements mirror one another, and all of those statements point to what's in the middle. What's in the middle? What's in the middle is Mipnei Shalom Habriot, for the sake of the peace among creatures, that one might not say to his fellow, my daddy's better than your daddy. There you go. Thank you. So that the chiasm shows that you've got a structure that's building towards the middle, focusing on the middle and showing the neat structure. So on the one hand, you've got this very careful little speech. On the other hand, you also have three. The human being was created individually, and the world was created for me, sandwiched by 3 major statements. And what are the 3 major statements? If I was a smaller group, I'd be able to go through with you, but just so that you can appreciate, the first one is that an individual equals a world. It's all about the individual. Every human being is themselves a world to themselves. And the second statement is all about community. We are all equal. I can't say my daddy's better than your daddy because we all have the same daddy. And since we all have one daddy, we're all equal. We're all the same, and we're all united. We form a single community. And thirdly, it's all about God. It's all about God. God is so powerful that God has the ability to do something that we can't possibly do. We use God, we take a mold, and from the mold, everyone comes out the same, but Dad has the ability to make everyone into, oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. Beautiful. Okay, we're recording this, so I'm going to be able to write down all of these brilliant things that you guys are saying in the chat and integrate them the next time I teach the class. Thank you. Keep them coming. Keep them coming. It's good. They're written down. I don't even have to write them down. So we've got 3 fantastic ideas: the individual, the community and equality, and third, Hashem. God is in this. God's ability much beyond all of us. And it's from there that Pahad Yitzhak steps in. He says that, like that Mishnah to me is so powerful. I could just say, Diana, we could spend the whole next hour talking about the Mishnah, but we're not going to. We're going to go, the Pahad Yitzhak actually takes the same Mishnah and he goes in a slightly different direction with it. I'm going to read it in the English. You have the source sheet. Can you tell me that you have the source sheet? You've got the source sheet in front of you? Okay, good. Otherwise I could share screen, but then I'll have less ability to interact with you. How many people want me to share screen? I see some people saying yes to sharing screen. Let me share screen. I think I can, there we go, share. Okay. Here we are in the Pahad Yitzhak. Okay, so the Pahad Yitzhak, he says, the basic fact upon which upon which the establishment stands is that a person was created as an individual. Okay, Adam nivra yechidi, and from this foundational fact emerges two alternating voices, two conflicting voices. The first voice declares all of us are children of a single father, kulanu, b'nei av echad nachnu. We've got one daddy. Our family tree can be traced to a single human being. If so, clearly, all of us are only partial sections of a single unit, and each of us are nothing more than segmented pieces of a single wholeness. This is a faithful source of the unity of humankind. In Hebrew, Ichud Ha'adam. Okay, we are all united. And now he's drawing on that middle section of our Mishnah, which was about community, right? To say that we are united. However, the second voice declares, and now he goes to the conflicting voice. There's two conflicting voices. The second voice is the nature of the one who births is in the child. Teva hamolid benolad. You can put, my mother can stick her face in and you can see it even a little bit better. The Mom, you're not showing so much. There you go. So since the head of our family tree is a single human being, and as a matter of course, each one of us is imprinted with an aspect of uniqueness in our origin, right? Teva hamolid b'molad. The first person, the original Adam, was unique. So too we, each of us must be unique. We have to differentiate ourselves. And that's what you see in the third piece of the Mishnah. The flesh and blood people pressed coins from the same mold, and they're all identical, while HaKadosh Baruch Hu molds all the human beings from a single mold of the original person, and there's not a single one who's like her fellow. So whereas we thought that Mishnah was all about showing how great God is, it's actually all about showing how great each individual is. Each of us are unique, thus the faithful source of the uniqueness of the human being.
Meesh, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Sorry to interrupt.
Rachel.
When you turn your head like this, you move off the mic, and then every second word gets dropped. So if you could face the screen and read from the screen, and then you'll convey better. Yeah.
Okay. Fine. I'm going to sacrifice seeing you guys then. Okay. Yeah, I understand the idea. It's just a little going to be hard for me to do all of that at once. So it's funny because I teach on Zoom all day and I haven't had any troubles, but of course, because you guys are here, it's not going as well. Here we are. It gives birth to the result is the very foundational fact that that the person was created as an individual. Nivra Adam Yechidi gives birth to two alternating descendants. We have a common source to both the unity and the uniqueness of the human being. Both the unity, Yichud Ha'adam, the Yichud Ha'adam, the uniqueness. And those two things, which would seem to be in actual conflict with each other, are actually come from the very same source of Adam Nivra Yechidi. Dayenu. I would say again there, Dayenu, the power of this is very, very powerful. He goes on to raise a question, okay, in paragraph, and I'm just to read you a bit from paragraph number 4. And in Psalms it says, He'er panecha v'nivasheha. Shine the light of your face. I remind you, we're going back to our question. We had this question about what's the relationship between be'or panecha and echad. Okay, shine your light upon us. God, we say to God, God, shine your face upon us, v'nivasheha, and we will be saved. And the sages said about this, Ein lanu ele he'arat panecha bilvad. We have nothing except the favor, finding favor, the light of your face. Finding favor is the light of God's face. That's what favor is. The singularity of a human requires them to say, for me, the world was created. Bishvili nivra ha'olam. That's the moral of the Mishnah, is that every individual has to say, Bishvili nivra ha'olam. And then the Pahad Yitzhak says, who could say Bishvili nivra ha'olam? Adam Harishon, the very first individual. When he was created, he was able to say, it was obvious to him that the world was created for him on day 6. He saw that there was nothing else going on. But what happened, and Rachel probably could say so much about this as a scholar of Midrash, but the Midrash develops a lot this idea that the first human, Adam Harishon, was, and I put it on your source sheet here at the end. Here, let me show you. Rabbi Levi said the apple of first Adam's heel could darken the disk of the sun, and just as his heel was thus, how much so was his face. Adam Harishon was huge, and he was the world in his eyes, right? In the eyes of his, so you can imagine, just as I am the light of the world in my parents' eyes, so too, God, that's how Adam Harishon was, the first man in that world. And Rav Yehuda said that Rav said, the size of Adam, the first human being, was from one end of the world to the other. As it's stated, since the day that God created man upon the earth, from one end of the earth to the other, which indicates that he spanned the entire length of the world. However, once he sinned, HaKadosh Baruch Hu placed God's hand upon him and diminished him, as it stayed, and you laid your hand upon me. And working from this midrash, the Pahad Yitzhak goes back to paragraph 4, and says, certainly, in original man's situation at creation, the recognition that the world was created for me was obvious. There was nothing else to discuss. Of course, the world was created for him. He was all the world. But after HaKadosh Baruch Hu rested God's hand upon him and shrunk him and decreed death upon him, certainly this awareness that the world, that Bishvili nivra ha'olam, is only available through an enduring trial, meaning it's not so easy in our current state, having been shrunken as we are to mere mortals, to sinful individuals who try to do things and are constantly being hit with all sorts of obstructions. We're not able to even make our voice heard on Zoom. Of course, we much less to be able to use breakout groups and mute at the right moments, right? In our mere mortalness, in our inability to even go out into the world in safety, we don't feel Bishvili nivra ha'olam. The opposite. We don't feel Bishvili nivra, that the world was created for me at all. After all, according to the simple understanding of the existence of the death seems to contradict the understanding that the world was created for me. After all, the world is going to remain after the passing and demise of the individual. In fact, the world is existing just fine without me. How many YouTube videos have you seen of how happy the world is when human beings as an entire species has contracted and staying inside? So this sense that the world was created for us, for me as an individual, is absolutely impossible. I don't feel that the world is created for me. So what we've got is a conflict, right? Is this sense that first, the Pahad Yitzhak says this incredibly beautiful thing from this idea of identity, of understanding Bishvili nivra ha'olam, that the world was created for me. I can understand both Ichud ha'adam, the unity of all the human beings, and Yichud ha'adam, the uniqueness of every individual. And from there, I actually have an understanding of what is spiritual identity. That is the ultimate of spiritual identity. Spiritual identity is about feeling our centrality in the world, having a sense of being the apple of God's eye. That is spirituality. And that we get from actually having a tremendous sense of self, of understanding how important we are, and also understanding how much we're united with each other and with God. Bishvili nivra ha'olam. However, and this is why I picked to teach this on a day like today, in the midst of being confined as we are to our homes and our mere mortality and painfully aware of our inability to do so much, is that we don't have access to our spiritual identity, if you will, because we feel shrunken, we feel mortal, we feel vulnerable, we feel pain, we feel the existence of death. And that gets in the way of our ability to connect with God. You maybe are familiar with the saying, there's a famous saying of Rav Simcha Bunim, who says that every person should have in their pocket two pieces of paper. One piece of paper that says, Bishvili nivra ha'olam, the world was created for me. And another piece of paper that says in the other pocket, Anochi afar ve'efer, I am nothing but dust and ashes. Says the Pahad Yitzhak, right? And you have to know, says Rav Simcha Bunim, you have to know which one to take out which, okay? Everything in life, says Rav Simcha Bunim, is to balance between the moments where you feel you're the center of the earth, and where those moments where you realize that you are absolute nothingness. Says the Pahad Yitzhak, no. Actually, your best spiritual identity comes when you feel yourself as the center of the world, as Bishvili nivra ha'olam. Identity and spirituality come together. But there's a problem. The problem is that Anochi afar ve'efer, sometimes I become aware of how much I'm dust and ashes. And when I'm aware of my dust and ashesness, I can't really feel myself fully and understand and feel either my ichud ha'adam, my unity with the rest of the world, nor my yichud ha'adam, my tremendous uniqueness in the world. And so, says the Pahad Yitzhak, the key to spiritual identity is to get back to that moment. And that's what we're trying to do. That's what we're trying to do. Now, I want to try to just, the next stage, and that's the first half, if you will, of the Pahad Yitzhak. I want to now move into the next half of the Pahad Yitzhak, where he tries to tie what is Or Panecha. What does it mean that these moments that we feel God's countenance upon us, restoring that sense, the emphasizing of our uniqueness and our oneness, that is spirituality, and that is the reason why we say Barcheinu Avinu Kulanu Kiechad Beor Panecha. In order to feel Or Panecha, the light of God's countenance, we have to feel echadness. We have to feel the extent to which we are both the unity of human beings and the uniqueness of human beings. But because of our mortality, where that knowledge is obstructed from us. Because of our mortality, that knowledge is obstructed from us. And now he enters the second part of the Ma'amar, the saying, and he begins to talk about how this connects to Shavuot, and specifically how it connects to the 10 Commandments. He begins with an understanding, and this I hope you have in your source sheet, also the entirety of, not on the source sheet that's right in front of you on your computer screen, but I also hope is posted up there. And if not, you can certainly be in touch with me using my email that's on this source sheet. I'll be happy to send you the entirety of the Ma'amar so you can see what the Pahad Yitzhak has to say. But he says like this, he says, we've spoken a lot. This is like one of the things I learned actually in Hebrew school that turns out to be true and valuable, is that the 10 Commandments are on 2 tablets. And the 2 tablets, of course, as you know, are the first 5 commandments have to do with Bein Adam L'Makom, our relationship with God. And the second 5 commandments have to do with our relationship with Bein Adam L'Makom, Bein Adam L'Chavero, between our interpersonal relationships. Okay, now we've gotten to holy relationships, the holy relationships part of the title. There's two types of holy relationships. Our relationship with the divine, first and foremost, and then secondly, our relationship with our fellow human being, secondly. And this is something that I didn't get to answer this question in the panel, but now I will. One thing that I think would be really fun would be on Shavuot to see how these 2 tablets line up with each other. The first commandment reflects on the 6th commandment. The first commandment, I am the Lord your God. The 6th commandment, don't murder. Okay, once you recognize God's uniqueness, you recognize also your fellow human being's uniqueness. Those 2 things are mirror images of each other. And he wants to go and show and to work with this parallel that we have between 2 sets of 10 commandments, between the 2 tablets. And he starts by calling attention to which is not one of the 10 commandments, but of course is an overarching principle lying behind the entirety of the Torah, and especially the 2nd tablets, which is that you shall love the Lord, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And the Ramban, here, let me show you this on the source sheet. The Ramban, in source number 5 on your source sheet, says the phrase love your neighbor as yourself is an exaggeration, which is so crazy. He says, this is the Ramban, by the way, Nachmanides. He says, don't take the commandment too seriously. Why can't you take the commandment too seriously? For 2 reasons. One, it's absolutely impossible to love someone like yourself. Of course, you always are going to prioritize yourself, and you have to decide who do you want to do the dishes, you or your partner? You want your partner to do the dishes. That's how it is. Okay? It's impossible to love as much as I.
Meesh, I think there's no audio coming from you.
Here I am. Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So, you can't love your neighbor as yourself. It's impossible, number 1. And number 2, it's usur. It's completely prohibited because it says in the halacha, Rabbi Akiva taught us, your life comes before the life of your fellow. If you're on a desert island and if you're in the desert and you only have 1 bottle of water and it's enough for you, only one of the 2 of you to get to life-giving water, you have to drink the water yourself because your life comes first. So there's 2 reasons to think that they have to, the re'echa kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself, is not to be taken seriously. 1, it's impossible, and 2, it's prohibited. And then he goes on to show you that there's another thing that's also impossible. We have a Gemara here, you're familiar with this from Aleinu. Bayom hahu, yeh Hashem echad, u'shemo echad. And on that day, the Lord shall be king over the earth, and on that day, God's name will be one. And the Gemara says, what? Today God's not one? What do you mean? Every day we say Shema twice a day. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. So why are we saying God is one? That's what the Shema is, to declare God's God's oneness. So why is it that we say in Aleinu, someday there will come a day that God will be one? Says Rabbi Acha, a great question, fantastic question. Rabbi Acha Bar Chanina says, the world to come is not like this world. In this world, upon good tidings, one recites, Baruch Hatov v'Hametiv. Thank you, God, who does good things, and who does good and is good. And over bad tidings, when bad things happen, we say, Baruch Dayan Ha'emet. There's bad things in the world. But someday, not only will we say the Shema twice a day, but we'll see everything as Hatov V'Metiv. We'll understand that God's oneness is everything in the world. And we'll see that everything that God does is one, and everything that God does is good. And so says the Pahad Yitzhak, and I'm going back to the Pahad Yitzhak. He says, there's actually only one way to know. The truth of the matter is, and now he's going back to this impossibility, the impossibility of feeling. How could we possibly feel? It's crazy to think that God gives us these commandments to declare God's oneness on the way and to love our fellow as ourselves, and they're totally impossible. But says the Pahad Yitzhak, the truth of the matter is that this equation of love for one's fellow is utterly impossible, except in a time when our family tree is open before us, truly revealed with total clarity, connecting us directly to original man who was created singularly. How can I feel that we are all one, that I love my neighbor as myself, when I remember that my neighbor is myself, right? Sometimes you do experience your neighbor as yourself. When you see that your child is a part of you, that we are all part of one thing, then we can love our neighbor as ourselves. And it turns, so under those circumstances, if we could really see Bishvili Nivra Ha'olam, if we could understand deeply that the world was created for me, in the sense that I have descended from Adam, from the first man, and I understood myself as connected directly to that first individual, and that the person next to me is also connected to that first individual, and that we were brothers, that we were siblings, that they're my child, then I would be able to then I would be able to love them as myself, because then I would be able to understand that we really are all one, that we're one and the same, because there's actually we're all part of Adam Harishon. We are part of Ichud Adam. We are all united. And if I could truly feel that at a spiritual level, then I could actually spiritually get to this notion of being connected to God, being connected to loving my neighbor as myself. And similarly, if I could really see that Bishvili Nivra Ha'olam, that the world was created for me, and that death wasn't hovering over me, and that I'm not Anochi Afar Ve'efer, that I am not dust and ashes, I'd also be able to understand Yichud Ha'adam. I'd be able to feel my uniqueness, and in that context, I'd be able to actually declare Hatov U'Meitiv. I wouldn't feel the pain of some things being bad and some things being good. I would actually feel that everything is good. And so what the Pahad Yitzhak says, it turns out that we have before us a chain of obfuscations that by their nature connect with one another. Meaning, in our current world, we are unaware of, and we can't possibly access because of death, we can't feel that the world was created for me. And because of death, we also can't understand the uniqueness of the original man, and consequently we also can't feel the unity of all human beings, and that blurs us from the ability to love our neighbor as ourselves. And similarly, it blurs us from the ability to see the good in the world. And if we could get back to this truth, if we could truly understand Bishvili Nivra Ha'olam, to understand our infinite worth, we'd actually be able to connect back into the goodness that is in the world and the goodness that is in every human being, and to truly love every individual. So we have merited, I'm going to go on to paragraph number 10 in the Pahad Yitzhak. We have merited, in any case, to the rule of two obfuscations, two things that have truths that have disappeared from us. The word in Hebrew is the he'almot, two truths that are lost, two types of uniqueness that were explained to us: uniqueness, unity of humankind, and the unity of good tidings. The two of them are actually two sides of the same coin. And after the obfuscation, the singularity of good tidings with respect to the human-divine relationships is parallel to the obfuscation of like yourself, kamocha, with respect to interpersonal relationships. That is to say, if we could really get to this truth of the ichud and the yichud of the Adam, the uniqueness of the individual, then we'd also be able to deeply feel the singularity of good tidings, and to love every individual completely. And so you see these 10 commandments, the two pieces of the 10 commandments. The first tablet about our relationship to God is messed with because of is disturbed by our inability to feel to feel our uniqueness and our unity, and similarly our love for others is disturbed in that way. And so the question is, how do we get there? How do we get back to that space? How do we manage to feel to feel that uniqueness? It says, Pahad Yitzhak, we have to go to revelation. We have to go to revelation. It's a revelation that we have what's called, we have, the tablets are called charut al haluchot. They are engraved on the tablets. And the sages interpreted, do not read charut, engraved, rather cherut. And the rabbis actually say, cherut mimalach hamavet. We are free from the angel of death. And the idea behind this is as follows: Torah and Israel are one. We're actually one and the same. And it's well known that when you witness the departing of the soul, it's like seeing a Torah scroll burnt. Do you know this halakha is such a beautiful halakha? That when you see a Torah scroll burnt, you have to tear your clothing twice. Once for the writing, once for the loss of the writing, and a second time for the loss of the parchment. And so too, when we're present with somebody at the time of that their soul expires, we also tear our clothes, because we've seen there's a parallel between the expiring of the soul of the individual with the burning of the Torah. And we can derive that there's this parallel between the soul of the body and the letters of the parchment. And just as the letters of the parchment can be erased and separated from the parchment, so too the soul could be separated from the body. But the tablets were not this way. They were carved letters. And they don't exist when the letters are carved. You can't, unlike parchment, you can't take them off the parchment, right? They are in the stone himself, part and partsful, and therefore they can't be erased or separated. And therefore, at the revelation of the giving of the tablets, the relationship between the soul and the body was also born in Israel, with resemblance to engraving that has no possibility of separating the letters from the place in which they were engraved. What I think he means there is that at this moment of revelation, we actually have access in a deep experiential way to a sense of or panecha, a sense of God's countenance upon us. And that's the intention behind the sage's suggestion that the tablets included freedom from the angel of death, from the world charut. Because charut means engraved, and this engraving is the secret connection between the body and the soul, which are inseparable. And Israel and the Torah are one entity. So what we're trying to achieve on Shavuot is a sense of revelation, a sense of getting those 10 commandments. And at that moment of 10 commandments, we have a sense of the our unity, our unity of body and soul, and the infinity of our life, because it's really through Torah that we have a sense of our eternality. And that eternality gives us access to Bishvili Nivra Ha'olam, to our sense of being in the core of the unity of the world, of the being the purpose of the creation of the world, and to really be able to understand both the uniqueness and the unity of every individual. And all of that only comes from our ability to say Nivra Adam Yechidi, and that possibility, please God, will come to us by receiving the tablets, by being part of revelation, experiencing revelation, to really understand Torah. Perhaps you've had that experience before, of learning Torah and the light that comes to your eyes at that moment that you get a good chiddush, that you feel the sense of Torah shining down on you. You can really understand that and feel a sense of God's presence amongst you, on you, and shining on your shoulder. And that presence gives you a sense of your eternity. The world was created for me. So to summarize, what I think Rav Yitzhak Hutner here has got this tremendous postmodern profundity, that he's given us this opportunity to focus on a beautiful Mishnah, a Mishnah that we say to someone exactly at the moment, that we say to a witness as he's testifying that someone ought to be executed, that we should understand just how important every individual is. Every individual is why the world was created. To teach us that every person is an entire world unto themselves. And we have to be aware of just how important we are, the infinite value of the human being. We're not just a world to ourselves, we're also the reason that the world was created. Says the Pahad Yitzhak, this Mishnah gives birth to two contradictory voices, that each individual is unique, and yet all of us are completely joined together. And then he suggests that by looking that what gets in the way of us being able to feel our full sense of our own self-importance is our mortality, our vulnerability, something that we've been feeling so very much in these days. And the way to get over that, and to be able to if we are able to get over that and to forget about our vulnerability and to see ourselves as somehow eternal by receiving the Torah, we'll also be able to not only understand our own power and our own infinite worth, but also to understand the infinite worth of our fellow human being, and similarly to be able to understand God's absolute goodness when we find ourselves in a world where God is not absolutely good, but that God is doing both good, Tov u'Meitiv, and Dayan Ha'emet. Simon, can you help by posting that the full ma'amar of the Pahad Yitzhak for everybody who wants? I can send it to you in email if anybody wants to. You have on the source sheet, you have my email, Meesh Hammer-Kossoy, meesh@pardes.org.il, and that will give you an opportunity that I can send it to you in a PDF if it's not up there as a PDF. Okay, I would love, there's so many chats up there and I haven't been able to listen to them, so I apologize. But I'm done now. I thank you for learning with me. My hope, my prayer for all of us is that we should be able to feel a little bit of our infinite worth through the revelation that we should experience on Shavuot, and also to not let the vulnerability and the mortality that we're so bogged down in these days distract us from our infinite worth, because that sense of that sense of Anochi Afar ve'efer, that sense of being dust and ashes, gets in the way of our ability to have what the Pahad Yitzhak says is a really healthy spiritual identity that lets us see the world. I thank you all for sharing with me, and I got it done in the amount of time that I was supposed to. I now have some time for questions and answers. I'm very happy to go back to some of these chats, or if, Simon, if you want to read out one of the chats that feels that's a question, I'm open to responding to them. Or if somebody wants to unmute themselves, I'm open to that too.
Regarding each one of us not being like a coin and having our own individuality, that doesn't seem to be reflected in this essay. Is that correct? Am I correct?
What he's saying is the Pahad Yitzhak is very excited about this idea of the uniqueness of the individual, which we thought was every individual looks different than the other individual. We thought when we learned it, I thought when I read it in the Mishnah, that it's all about how important, how special God is, right? That's what the Mishnah says, to tell us the greatness of God. That God has the ability to make each of us unique, even though we came all of us out of the same mold. And it says the Pahad Yitzhak, but along the way we are, not only does God have, once God has made us unique, each one of us is different, then we say, just like the first man was unique, so too we are unique. And then he cites our Mishnah. He does cite our Mishnah.
Then in overcoming death, our uniqueness seems to be, when it gets to the Torah part and the tablets, it seems to be dissolved, kind of.
It does feel, where's the overcoming of the death? I'm going to say, Carol, that I don't love his answer about the overcoming of the death. Like, I love the parallels of I love the Ichud and the Yichud, and I love the parallel between the two tablets, and I love how he's saying that death gets in the way of our ability to see all of this oneness. And for him, the answer is to see death as a passing experience, and that we have to have a full belief in Tchiyat HaMeitim. I didn't get in the resurrection of the dead. Now, I didn't focus on that section, because I find it a difficult section, but he says once you give up the idea of the resurrection of the dead, then you can start to think that the individual is not so valuable. And he blames. Let me see if I can find this sentence in. It's not on your source sheet, but he says that. כיוון שאמונת תחיית המתים איננו שולטת אצל אנשי החול, שוב לא שקטו ולא נחו, עד שהורידו את ערכו של אדם, עד לידי השוואה עם שאר בעלי חיים. Okay, he says, and remember when he lives through himself, born in 1906, he says, we see to our own eyes what happens when you don't believe in the resurrection of the dead, that then you see, and because you see that the secular folks don't believe in the resurrection of the dead, and as soon as they don't, then they didn't put themselves at rest until they reduced the value of the human being to be just an animal, right? Animals and human, if you don't think of us as somehow eternal beings, then we're just animals. Are we really any different than animals, he says. So to him, this idea of resurrection of the dead and eternal life is really essential. But he thinks that what he does is that we get a little bit of a sense of our eternal power through the revelation of Torah. We have a window into our eternity through revelation, and that's something that we're trying to achieve when we stand at Sinai in just 2 short weeks. So thank you for your question. You got it like exactly where I knew. That was like very good listening, because I was like, how can I fudge over this part? Because it doesn't resonate for me. That was an excellent question. Thank you for that. Someone else want to ask a question? Rachel, please.
So I'm not sure that this is a question, but I love that the image that charut, or your chirut, you're free from the angel of death. In fact, in Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer, the text that I love very much, in the Midrash, Parchu nishmatam, actually their souls left them when they heard the Aseret HaDivrot, when they heard God speaking from Sinai. And there's a sense in which that sets the precedent. And then when they heard the next word, their soul and their body could come together again, and they were enlivened. And I think there is a sense in which experiencing Sinai as we do learning Torah, right, there's a way in which our soul and our bodies are coming together, and there is a mechaye metim, a little mini mechaye metim, a mini revival of the dead in us. And I think it's powerful, and that we can access our uniqueness through that enlivening. So thank you for sharing this.
Wow, thank you so much for that connection. That was truly beautiful, really beautiful. Somebody else want to speak up?
Can I just, I really appreciate the image of death as part of what determines or doesn't our sense of individuality. And I wonder whether or not, the differences between death and fear of death, or a sense of mortality, that it's actually that when we are afraid of death, that we don't have room for another. But we have a sense that death isn't actually individual to us, but something that everyone experiences, that we're able to have a sense that, the world is meaningful, right? It has to be meaningful, because why else would we live and die? It's not just for us. It's almost maybe the reversal of that sense that, that it's all about a reward. It's actually in some ways all about this world matters because it's finite.
We see this power. If we could be truly aware of Ichud Adam, the unity of human beings, which we're unable, but that's so difficult for us to get in touch with. So if we could feel that revelation in a real way of our unity, then we would feel the sense of things continue after us and what comes after us. And that is why I think that, so anthropologically speaking, human beings get so much relief from having children, descendants, and seeing things, spiritual descendants and physical descendants, and those things do give us a sense of continuity that matters. And I hear what you're saying, the opposite, that the finiteness can sometimes make things more acutely powerful.
Well, we may be better aware of the oneness of the world, but we wouldn't need Torah then. We'd be like the angels. God says, what do you do? I mean, the whole thing is based on our not being able to recognize that oneness and having to negotiate my needs and your needs, and not be a person who's totally selfish or a person who's totally selfless. I feel like that's kind of the flip side of what's going on in this, this vision of what it would be in the future, as opposed to what it is at the moment.
Yeah, I love that you're putting your finger right on this, because God didn't choose to give the Torah to angels. God chose to give the Torah to mere mortals. So this Torah is designed to help us get in touch with that, to transcend our mortality in some way, which is really very powerful. Thank you.
Meesh?
Yes.
So I have written in the chat, which I know you can't see without turning your head. So
right, it's very hard for me to be fully present and reading at the same time.
That'll be the next mechanical problem that we solve. But so I'm just trying to understand. So according to Pahad Yitzhak, the only way to transcend the vulnerability of our mortality, or our fear of our death, or our finiteness, is through the study of Torah, which is a way of attaining dveikut with God. Is that what he's saying?
He's saying that, and having a belief in the resurrection.
Okay.
So yes, that is what he's saying. I think that's correct. I do see there's many questions here. Does somebody else want to read their question? I'm happy to have people read their questions, ask them themselves. There are many questions here.
Meesh, can I just ask? Sorry, it's dveikut with God, but could we read it also as dveikut with like Bnei Israel? as in like the unity of the experience in some way also leads to the everlastingness of it.
It's interesting. Thank you for that, Jenna. That Rav Jenna. That the you know, the Pahad Yitzhak says Yisrael ve'oraita chadu, but the Zohar actually says Yisrael, Torah ve'elokim chadu. Right, that God and Torah and Israel, they're all one. It's all one big unity. And the key word of unity is so central here, and that we can't really separate between God and being able to cling to Torah is being able to cling to God, being able to cling to Torah is being able to cling to Israel. Right, the meaning like that, that's the goal. The goal is we're all the same. So that dveikut is absolutely, and you feel it in the two tablets, right? Like the realizing, the actualizing tablet 1 will by definition manifest itself in the actualizing of tablet 2, and to really feel the unity in the world, which is, God, it sounds so good. How can we get there? We could get there if we could have a sense of, if we were Adam Harishon, that our heel could block out the light of the world, then we'd be there. Then we'd be there.